The day they exiled her, the sky above the capital split open like a polite wound. No one screamed. In her empire, screaming was considered a primitive leak of data. Instead, the High Council observed from their hovering thrones while the dimensional aperture unfolded in perfect geometric silence. She stood alone at its edge, spine straight, hands folded behind her back, as if awaiting applause rather than banishment. "Princess Ilyara of the 7th genetic line," intoned the Prime Counselor, his voice amplified through the crystalline lattice that threaded the air. "Declared reproductively null by unanimous algorithm, you are reassigned." Reassigned? Such a gentle word for exile. Ilyara inclined her head. Her long ears, tapering elegantly past her jawline, caught the ambient frequencies of the chamber. She could hear the faint oscillation of the Empire's predictive engines recalculating her absence. They had already erased her from 17 future simulations. In 12 of them, productivity increased. "How efficient," she said calmly. A murmur fluttered through the chamber, disapproval measured in decibels. "You will be transferred to the planet designated Earth," the counselor continued. "You are to reside there as a cultural offering to a solitary human male. Your presence will symbolize our goodwill." Goodwill, she noted privately, was what empires called their insults when they wanted them gift-trapped. The aperture brightened. Coordinates locked. Somewhere across a minor spiral arm, a man named Daniel Mercer was attempting to repair a lawn mower with a wrench and unreasonable optimism. The transition was instant. One moment she stood beneath floating citadels of bioengineered alloy, the next she was knee-deep in crushed tomato plants. Daniel stared at her. She stared at Daniel. A breeze passed between them, undecided about which civilization it preferred. "You're standing on my San Marzanos," Daniel said finally. She examined the red pulp staining her ceremonial boots. "I have arrived with dignity." "Yeah, well, dignity just flattened my dinner plans." A flicker of light snapped shut behind her as the aperture collapsed. The Empire's distant observers adjusted their instruments. Atmospheric composition, tolerable. Gravity, inconvenient. Human subject, unimpressive. Daniel lowered the wrench slowly. "Okay, either I forgot to pay a bill to the universe or you're not from around here." "I am Princess Ilyara," she replied, "former heir to the 7th genetic line. I have been assigned to you." "Assigned," he echoed, "like homework." Her long ears twitched, parsing tone. "I am unfamiliar with the metaphor." "Yeah, that tracks." He circled her once, not rudely, but with open curiosity. His gaze paused on her ears. "So, is that a fashion thing or a bonus feature?" "They are auditory sensory extensions, capable of detecting quantum fluctuation." "Cool," he said. "Can they detect where my mower's making that whining noise from?" She considered this with complete seriousness. "If activated at full sensitivity, yes. Please don't activate anything at full sensitivity near my garage." A faint hum rippled through the air as an invisible drone descended from high orbit, scanning. Ilyara felt it in her bones, the Empire watching, expecting collapse, humiliation, despair. She straightened further. "I am to reside here indefinitely," she informed him. "You are not required to perform ritual submission." "Great, because my knees are bad." Silence stretched. Daniel wiped his hands on his jeans. "You hungry?" "I do not require sustenance in the primitive sense." Her stomach, traitorously, produced a small, unfamiliar contraction. Daniel raised an eyebrow. Primitive seems to be making a comeback. Inside his house, the air smelled faintly of oil and overcooked coffee. Ilyara stepped across the threshold with the caution of someone entering an uncharted biome. Her empire grew buildings from responsive coral metal. This structure appeared assembled through negotiation with gravity. He handed her a chipped mug that read World SOKAYEST human. "It's tea," he said. "Don't worry, it's not poisoned. I'm not organized enough for that." She held the mug. Heat seeped into her palms. Her people drank from levitating prisms calibrated to nutrient balance. This vessel bore a faded cartoon squirrel. "You live alone?" she asked. "Just me and my bad decisions." She sampled the tea. It was imperfect. It was unevenly sweet. It was surprisingly pleasant. "My civilization concluded I am infertile," she said abruptly. "Therefore politically obsolete." Daniel leaned against the counter. "That's a rough performance review." "It is a genetic certainty." "Machines say lots of things." He gestured vaguely toward the garage. "My toaster thinks bread is optional." Her ears angled forward. "Your domestic appliance demonstrates predictive error." "Constantly." A pause, "Then your species tolerates malfunction," she observed. "We call it Tuesday." Above them, in silent orbit, the Empire's instruments recorded no tears, no breakdown. Instead, they registered elevated oxytocin levels in both subjects and a statistically insignificant but intriguing synchronization of heart rhythms. Daniel pointed toward a hallway. There's a spare room. It used to be my office, but I mostly stored regrets in there. We can clear it out. You would alter your habitat for me? She asked. Yeah, you did kind of drop in unannounced, but I'm adaptable. Adaptable? The word settled somewhere deep within her, where algorithms had once declared a closed future. Her long ears caught the faint crackle of distant cosmic surveillance. Let them watch, she thought. Daniel hesitated. So, Princess, do you have a last name, or is that like a one-name deal? Ilyara is sufficient. Okay, Ilyara. Rule 1. If you're going to use quantum fluctuation hearing, give me a heads up before I start the blender. She looked at him, at the crooked cabinets, at the fragile absurdity of this small dwelling on a chaotic planet. In my empire, she said slowly, I was considered a failure. Daniel shrugged. Well, here you just owe me tomatoes. And for the first time since the council pronounced her null, something like laughter, quiet, uncertain, but undeniably real, rose in her chest, startling both the distant observers and herself. On her third morning on Earth, Ilyara attempted to declare war on the washing machine. It is growling, she informed Daniel, standing rigidly before the appliance as it shook with dramatic indignation. I believe it challenges me. Daniel, half awake and holding a screwdriver like a security blanket, squinted at the machine. It's on spin cycle. It sounds unstable. It is unstable, that's how it works. The machine thudded violently. Ilyara's long ears flared outward, catching the electromagnetic stutter of the motor. Its internal rotation is asymmetrical. Yeah, Daniel said. I overloaded it with towels, that's on me. She watched the glass door with the solemn focus of someone observing a volatile star. In her empire, garments dissolved into cleansing light and reassembled molecule by molecule. Here, fabric endured a controlled storm and emerged damp. Your civilization entrusts hygiene to chaos, she said. We also deep-fry food and argue on the internet. It's a whole ecosystem. Her ears twitched at the faint, familiar tremor above the atmosphere. The Empire was still watching. Their orbital instruments hummed in frequencies only she could perceive, measuring her cortisol, her posture, the probability of emotional collapse. The number had dropped 12% since arrival. She suspected this annoyed them. Daniel handed her a folded shirt. You're staring at it like it insulted your family. It is inefficient. So am I before coffee. She took the shirt. The cotton felt coarse compared to the adaptive silks she once wore, fabrics that adjusted to temperature and mood. This cloth did nothing except exist. There was something almost heroic about that. Later in the garage, Daniel activated what he proudly called a minor spatial recalibration device, which Ilyara identified as a reckless attempt to fold a centimeter of space using salvaged microwave components. You will rupture your planetary crust, she informed him. Nah, he said. Worst case, I blow a fuse. Her ears flattened as the device whined. Your understanding of worst case is biologically optimistic. The machine sparked, flickered, and emitted a sad pop before dying in a curl of smoke. Daniel coughed. Okay, slightly worse than a fuse. She stepped forward, extending her fingers. A faint shimmer rippled from her palm as she engaged a low-level field stabilizer embedded beneath her skin. The residual spatial distortion settled. He blinked. You just smoothed reality. It was wrinkled. Good to know that's a thing. She found herself enjoying these exchanges. In the Empire, conversation had been strategic, every word weighed for political consequence. Here, words wandered, they tripped. They sometimes fell into jokes. That evening, they sat on the back steps. The sky above Earth displayed no organized traffic of luminous carriers, no disciplined constellations aligned by engineering. Just scattered stars, indifferent and magnificent. In my world, she said, romantic partnerships are assigned by genomic compatibility scores. Daniel leaned back on his hands. On Earth, we swipe left. I do not understand. It's a long story involving poor decisions. Her gaze shifted inward. My genome was mapped at birth, simulated across 9,000 potential pairings. Each resulted in non-viable offspring. My reproductive system was declared decorative. Daniel was quiet for a moment. That's brutal. It was efficient. He nudged her shoulder lightly. You ever think maybe their data's incomplete? Our predictive engines account for 98.7% of biological variance. Cool, what about the other one? 3%. She hesitated. Above them, the Empire's observation array recalibrated focus as her heart rate increased. The remaining percentage, she said slowly, is classified as environmental anomaly. Daniel grinned. Earth's basically a walking anomaly. A cricket chirped, she startled. Relax, he said, that's just a bug. It is broadcasting. It's flirting. With whom? Everything. She considered the tiny creature's relentless call. No algorithm guided it. No council approved its noise. It simply persisted. Days turned into weeks. She learned the rhythm of his life, the way he muttered at malfunctioning tools, the way he apologized to inanimate objects after striking them, the way he left space at the table without consciously deciding to. She contributed in quiet ways. She recalibrated his failing solar panels with microscopic adjustments of energy. She filtered trace pollutants from the soil. The tomatoes began to thrive again. You're cheating, he accused lightly, examining a particularly robust plant. I am optimizing. Same thing. One afternoon, a pulse of vertigo overtook her. It began as a subtle harmonic shift within her abdomen, a resonance out of sync with her baseline physiology. She froze, gripping the kitchen counter. Daniel looked up from his laptop. You okay? My internal equilibrium is recalculating. That sounds expensive. She closed her eyes. Her long ears strained inward, listening not to orbiting drones but to herself. There was a rhythm there, faint, independent, impossible. Her people's medical chambers had scanned her down to quantum irregularities. They had rewritten sections of her DNA in futile attempts to correct her. Every result had returned null. The rhythm persisted. Daniel, she said carefully, do human females experience systemic fluctuations prior to catastrophic failure? That depends heavily on context. She turned to him, eyes wide not with fear, but with something far more destabilizing. Acquire one of your primitive biochemical assays. You mean a test? Yes, he stood slowly. For catastrophic failure. For confirmation. An hour later, they stood side by side in the bathroom, staring at a small plastic device that, according to the packaging, was 99% accurate. It's blinking, Daniel whispered. It is decisive, she replied, 2 lines, silence pressed in thick and electric. That can't be right, he said reflexively. My civilization's entire reproductive doctrine states that it is. They looked at each other. He let out a shaky laugh. So either this thing is defective, or the Empire's predictive engines overlooked environmental anomaly. Her hand moved to her abdomen, tentative, reverent. Above Earth, alarms rippled through the Empire's observation deck as their instruments registered unprecedented hormonal markers from their exiled princess. Data streams contradicted centuries of certainty. Daniel exhaled slowly. Okay. Hypothetically, if this isn't catastrophic failure, what is it? Ilyara felt the new rhythm again, fragile yet insistent, like the cricket's relentless song. It is proof, she said softly. Of what? Her long ears lifted, no longer straining for surveillance, but attuned to the quiet revolution within her. That the universe, she answered, does not always obey its own calculations. Daniel stared at the blinking test, then at her. Well, he said faintly, that's going to make for an awkward galactic performance review. The summons arrived at dawn, though on her world dawn was a negotiable concept. A column of light unfolded in Daniel's backyard, careful this time to avoid the tomatoes. The Empire had learned something about optics. Ilyara stood at the window, one hand resting against the subtle curve of her abdomen, her long ears angled toward the descending harmonic tones. They've stopped pretending, she said. Daniel peered over her shoulder. Yeah, that looks official, less random alien accident, more we'd like a word. The light condensed into a familiar sigil, the authority of the High Council. A voice followed, amplified across interstellar distance. Princess Ilyara of the 7th genetic line. You are commanded to return immediately for genomic verification. Daniel raised his hand toward the sky. You could have just emailed. She almost smiled. Months ago, she would have stiffened at the word commanded. Now she felt something steadier, something that did not require permission to exist. They are afraid, she said quietly. Of you. Of being wrong. She turned to him. I must go. Yeah, figured. He swallowed. You coming back? The question hung heavier than any decree. I do not know what form back will take, she answered honestly. But I am no longer going anywhere in disgrace. He nodded once. Good, because you kind of owe me for emotional distress and tomatoes. The transport enveloped her gently. As the field lifted her from Earth's gravity, her ears caught the frantic recalculations from orbit. Her hormonal levels, the secondary heartbeat within her, the stable integration of hybrid DNA, all of it streamed into imperial databases like heresy written in code. The capital received her in silence. No applause, no accusation, just the hum of systems struggling to reconcile data with doctrine. She stood again before the High Council, but she did not bow as deeply as before. Not from arrogance, but from balance. Verification, the Prime Counselor demanded. Of course, she replied. Medical constructs descended, rings of light, scanning lattices, quantum probes designed to detect the smallest genetic aberration. They passed through her without pain. She felt the child respond, not with fear, but with steady resilience. Data flooded the chamber. Gasps were subtle in her culture, but measurable. Several counselors' neural implants spiked in irregular patterns. The predictive engines, suspended above like luminous judges, began to emit discordant tones. Impossible, one counselor whispered. Improbable, corrected another automatically. Confirmed, the central system announced, its voice stripped of inflection. Viable hybrid gestation, genetic compatibility achieved through unmodeled environmental interaction. A silence followed that felt like a system reboot. The Prime Counselor turned to her. Our simulations accounted for all known variables. You accounted for perfection, she replied evenly, not persistence. Murmurs. Our science is not flawed, he insisted. It is incomplete, she said, as I was. She stepped forward. Months ago, she would have spoken with rehearsed diplomacy. Now her words carried something less polished and more human. You exiled me as a political insult, she continued. You declared me reproductively null. You defined my worth by outcome projections. On Earth, I was offered tea in a chipped mug and a spare room cleared of regrets. No genome was requested, no output expected. A ripple of confusion passed through the chamber at the phrase chipped mug. Our people have mastered matter, she said. We fold space, we rewrite DNA. Yet we forgot that adaptation does not emerge from control alone. It emerges from exposure, from unpredictability, from compassion. The predictive engines above flickered, recalculating with expanding parameters. One counselor leaned forward. The human male, he must possess unique genetic anomalies. Ilyara allowed herself a small smile. He once attempted to fold space using microwave components. A few counselors exchanged looks. He succeeded, one asked cautiously. He produced smoke. For the first time in recorded council history, a short, startled laugh escaped someone's throat. It was quickly suppressed, but it had occurred. The point, she continued, is not that humanity is technologically superior. It is not. Their machines fail frequently. Their washing devices growl. Their predictive models are called weather forecasts and are wrong half the time. Another ripple, this time less rigid. Their strength lies elsewhere, she said softly. They continue, they repair, they make room at the table. She placed her hand over her abdomen. This child exists because your algorithms left one. 3% undefined. Earth lives in that percentage. The central engine pulsed, processing. Recommendation, it intoned at last. Expansion of genomic compatibility models. Initiate interspecies research collaboration. The Prime Counselor studied her for a long moment. You return not as proof of disgrace, he said slowly, but as proof of limitation. Yes, she answered, yours. A dangerous statement. Once it might have sealed her fate. Instead, the chamber did not erupt, it recalibrated. Your status, the counselor continued, is reinstated. She shook her head gently, not as I was. A pause. I will not resume my previous designation, she said. I will serve as liaison to Earth. My child will belong to both worlds. You would divide your loyalty. I have multiplied it. The engines above shifted tone again, this time harmonizing rather than clashing. Approved, the central system declared. It was not thunderous, it was not dramatic, it was final. Days later, a sanctioned vessel descended toward Earth not as an insult but as invitation. Daniel stood in the yard, hands on hips. You brought friends. Colleagues, she corrected, stepping from the transport. Her long ears caught no undertone of mockery in the orbiting fleet, only curiosity. So, he said carefully, glancing at the distant ships, how'd the performance review go? They are updating their software. Nice. She looked at him, at the uneven garden, at the house that negotiated daily with gravity. Months ago, she had arrived here stripped of purpose. Now she carried one that no council had assigned. I am no longer defined by what I could not produce, she said. Good, he replied, because you've produced a lot of paperwork. She laughed openly now, without hesitation. Above them, alien vessels adjusted their scanning protocols to account for soil irregularities and cricket broadcasts. In orbit, new research directives replaced exile decrees. On Earth, a spare room was being converted again, this time not to store regrets but to prepare for arrival. The Empire had sought proof of failure. It received proof of growth. And as Ilyara stood between two worlds, no longer null, no longer assigned, but choosing, the future did not unfold like a fixed equation. It unfolded like something alive.